Tonight, we step into a landscape where roads disappear without warning, where the sky lowers itself until it feels close enough to touch, and where a simple wooden wagon becomes the only barrier between a human body and a winter that does not care who you are or where you meant to go. Because you are no longer traveling tonight, you are stopped, held in place by wind and snow, standing beside a covered wagon as daylight drains away into a dull, colorless grey, and the first flakes begin to fall, not gently, but sideways, driven hard by a wind that has already made its decision for you. The canvas above your head smells faintly of old dust and damp cloth. Your boots sink into packed snow with a quiet crunch, and every breath you take feels sharper than the last, cutting just a little deeper into your chest, while somewhere beyond the veil of falling snow, the land you planned to cross today has folded itself shut, erased as if it never existed, leaving you here, facing a night you will not survive in the way people like to imagine survival. Not bravely, not comfortably, but narrowly, quietly, just enough to wake up again. So before you settle in, before the cold fully claims your attention, take a moment to breathe, to dim the lights around you, and if you wish, to let this story unfold slowly. Because tonight we are not rushing anywhere. We are staying exactly where we are, inside a wooden box on wheels, listening as a blizzard learns the shape of your shelter. You climb into the wagon as the first real gust hits, your gloved hand sliding along the side rail until you find a grip, the wooden steps slick beneath your boot, and the moment you pull yourself inside, the world shrinks dramatically, because the wagon box is smaller than you remember, darker, tighter, and instantly heavy with the knowledge that it was never designed for rest, only for movement, for hauling goods across open land, not for holding human bodies still through a winter storm. The floorboards beneath you are hard and unyielding, cold enough that you can feel it pressing through layers of wool and fabric. And this is something rarely emphasized in simple frontier stories, that most 19th century covered wagons had little to no insulation at all, because they were essentially wooden crates on wheels, stretched with canvas and hope, the canvas pulled tight over curved wooden bows that now creak softly as the wind tests them. You lie down carefully, because there is no room to be careless, every movement costing you warmth, your head resting on a folded coat, your knees drawing inward not for comfort, but because there is nowhere else for them to go, and as the light fades completely, the temperature does not drop dramatically. It simply settles, creeping inward patiently, finding every gap in your clothing, every pause between breaths. The sound begins to change as the storm builds, snow hissing against the canvas, the fabric billowing inward with each gust before snapping back into place, a constant restless noise that never quite repeats itself. And you realize quickly that silence will not visit you tonight, that this will be a night of listening, whether you want it to be or not. There is a faint smell inside the wagon now, wet wool, old wood, a trace of animal grease and smoke from earlier in the day. Not unpleasant, but heavy, grounding, a reminder that this is not a space meant for comfort, only for endurance. And as the wind rises again, louder this time, you tuck your hands closer to your chest and shift your weight slowly, already learning that unnecessary movement wastes heat, and wasted heat is something you cannot afford. A lesser-known detail from trail diaries mentions that some travelers tied small bells or bits of metal to their wagons during storms, not to scare animals but to reassure themselves, because as long as the sound continued, the wagon was still standing, still breathing with the wind, and although you have no bells tonight, you listen closely all the same, reading the language of canvas and wood, learning which creaks mean survival and which ones demand attention. Outside, the horizon no longer exists. Inside, time stretches and loosens its grip, and as snow begins to pile against the lower edges of the wagon, insulating and threatening at the same time, you understand something quietly important, that sleeping in a covered wagon during a blizzard is not really about sleeping at all. It is about fitting yourself into a space that was never meant to hold a night like this, and learning, slowly, patiently, how to stay. As the night stretches forward, you begin to understand that warmth is not something you create all at once, but something you assemble slowly, layer by layer, mistake by mistake, reaching for whatever is near you and repurposing it with care, because nothing inside this wagon is being used the way it was intended anymore. Every object reassigned to the single quiet goal of keeping heat from leaving your body. A coat folded twice becomes padding beneath your hip. A spare shirt turns into a makeshift scarf. Sleeves are pulled farther down than they were ever meant to go, sealing small openings where cold air slips in unnoticed. And although clothing in the 1800s was heavy by modern standards, often made of dense wool or rough cotton, that weight works in your favor now, pressing down slightly, uncomfortable but reassuring, trapping pockets of warm air close to your skin. You tuck fabric beneath yourself, creating a crude cocoon, because the floorboards beneath you steal heat relentlessly, and anything that separates you from the wood feels like a small victory, even if it lasts only minutes. And you notice how instinctively you begin to think in terms of margins, of gains and losses measured in degrees rather than comfort. Someone nearby shifts, offering the edge of an extra covering without a word, and you accept it with a small nod they may not even see, because sharing warmth here is not sentimental, it is practical, almost mathematical, and the air inside the wagon grows thicker, as layers trap not only heat but moisture, breath and sweat collecting invisibly until fabric grows damp and heavy. Wool, favored for generations, holds warmth even when wet, but it itches, it stiffens, it clings to skin in a way that reminds you constantly of its presence, and you scratch your wrist once before stopping, because even small movements feel expensive now, energy becoming a kind of currency that must be spent carefully. There is a curious detail tucked away in some trail accounts describing how people stuffed spare clothing with dried grass, newspapers, or even straw when they could, turning garments into makeshift insulation. And although you have nothing like that tonight, you imitate the spirit of the idea, folding and refolding until layers trap air as much as fabric, realizing slowly that air itself is the real insulator, the invisible thing you are trying to keep close. Your breathing slows as you settle into this layered stillness, and while the storm outside has not softened, the cold inside the wagon feels less aggressive now, not gone, but quieter, retreating from your core and focusing instead on fingers, toes, ears, the places farthest from your heart. You pull your hat down lower, covering as much of your face as you can without smothering yourself, breathing through cloth so the air warms slightly before reaching your lungs, and you test a new position carefully, sliding one knee closer to your chest, freezing when cold slips in, waiting until warmth returns before completing the movement in tiny increments, because this is how you move now, slowly, deliberately, like someone learning a new language made entirely of sensation. The smell inside the wagon deepens, damp wool, unwashed cotton, leather warmed and cooled again and again. Not pleasant, but human, and strangely reassuring, because cold that kills is often silent and dry, and this cold is neither. It is busy, noisy, constantly reminding you of itself. You flex your fingers inside your sleeves, wiggle your toes just enough to remind them they still belong to you, each movement followed by stillness, and this rhythm begins to feel calming. Move, wait, breathe, a cycle that repeats without thought. The wagon shifts under the weight of snow, and a low groan runs through the wood, instinctively tightening your layers as if fabric alone could brace the structure. And you imagine the snow outside acting as a barrier now, muffling the wind slightly, pressing in like a heavy blanket of its own, because snow insulates too when it behaves. Your thoughts drift as your body settles, and you find yourself thinking about how many hands have worn these clothes before you, how many winters they have already endured, and there is comfort in worn fabric, in the idea that it has survived other nights like this and might survive this one as well. Someone near your feet coughs softly and pulls their covering tighter, the sound reminding you that you are not alone in this negotiation with the cold, that everyone inside this narrow space is solving the same problem in slightly different ways. No one speaking because nothing needs to be said. You allow yourself to rest into the layers. Not sleep yet, just rest. The storm continuing its work outside while inside you have built a small, fragile island of warmth from whatever you carried with you. Imperfect, improvised, and absolutely essential. And as the night continues to press forward, you begin to realize that this is only the second lesson the wagon is teaching you, that survival here is not dramatic, not heroic, but careful, patient and quiet, shaped by inches and breaths, and the slow understanding of what your body truly needs to make it through the hours ahead. Sometime after the cold settles into a steady presence, sound becomes the main thing you notice, not the ache in your joints or the stiffness creeping through your limbs, but the constant voice of wind working against canvas, a sound that never repeats itself, sometimes a long hollow rush, sometimes a sharp snap, sometimes a low groan as the wooden ribs answer pressure, the only way they know how. You lie still and listen, because listening costs less energy than worrying, and the canvas above you moves with each gust, bowing inward before tightening again, never quite touching your face, but coming close enough that you imagine it might, and that imagined closeness keeps you alert in a quiet, measured way. Snow adds a muffled hush as it accumulates, then slides away in a faint scrape, and this rhythm replaces silence completely, becoming the background of your thoughts, the tide you float on whether you want to or not. And you realize that people traveling in the 19th century learned to judge weather by sound as much as sight, listening to wind patterns the way sailors listen to the sea. You find yourself doing the same now, even without training or intention, noticing that a deeper roar suggests open ground nearby, while a duller, heavier thud hints at snowbanks forming against the wheels, each variation feeling meaningful even if you are not sure what it means. There is an intimacy to the noise at night that daylight never offers, because pressed inches from the fabric that separates you from it, the storm feels close enough to have intent, as if it is testing the wagon deliberately, pushing, probing, waiting, and with each strong gust your body tenses, then releases again when the structure holds. This cycle repeats until it becomes automatic, tension rising and fading without conscious thought, breath steadying again and again, and you understand why some travelers gave names to the sounds their wagons made, treating them like familiar voices, because naming something makes it less frightening, gives it shape and limits. You begin to recognize patterns yourself, that particular creak meaning the frame is settling, that sharper crack meaning snow has broken loose from the canvas, and as your breathing syncs with the rhythm outside, you find a strange calm in the repetition, inhaling during the lull between gusts and exhaling as the wind returns. A stronger blast rattles the wagon more noticeably, and someone nearby stirs, then settles again without speaking, the shared silence remaining intact, because words would feel too sharp here, too fragile against the noise, and the brief pauses between gusts feel almost startling in their emptiness. Historians still argue whether psychological strain or physical exposure wore travelers down faster during severe weather. And lying awake with your ears tuned to every snap and groan, you feel the weight of that question in your own body, because the cold itself is manageable in moments, but the vigilance, the constant readiness is what drains you. Your mind tries to wander, but the sound pulls it back each time, a low moan vibrating through the frame when the wind catches the canvas just right, sounding almost like an animal call, and although you know it is just fabric and air, your heart rate lifts slightly before settling again. Snow continues to change the acoustics as drifts build higher against the wagon, the wind losing its sharpness and growing deeper, more muffled as if the storm is wrapping the shelter in thick blankets of sound. And this should be comforting, yet it introduces a new awareness of weight, of pressure. You imagine snow stacking inch by inch along the sides, pressing where the canvas meets wood, and you listen carefully for signs of strain, for a tear or a sudden flap that does not recover, but none come, and when the wagon holds, you release a breath you did not realize you were holding. Your ears grow tired before the rest of you does. The constant noise blurring into something almost musical, a rough, uneven lullaby, and your thoughts begin to drift sideways, images forming without effort, a stretch of road traveled earlier, the memory of a fire that feels impossibly far away. Then a sharp snap jerks you back to full awareness, muscles tightening, attention sharpening, until you realize nothing has changed. The wagon is still intact, the storm still raging, everything exactly as it was moments ago, and you settle again, letting the sound wash over you. Gradually something shifts, and you stop listening for danger and start listening for reassurance, because each creak that resolves means the structure is still sound. Each gust that passes without damage is another small victory, and you are learning the language of survival by ear alone. As the night wears on, the sound becomes less something you endure and more something you exist within, filling the darkness so completely that there is no room for fear to echo, and wrapped in layers pressed close to others, you float on noise and breath, waiting for the storm to decide it has said enough. And as you lie there, listening to canvas speak in the language of wind, you understand that the wagon is no longer just shelter. It is an instrument translating the storm into something you can hear, measure, and live alongside, at least for now, as the long night continues to unfold around you. The cold does not announce itself with drama. It does not rush you or demand attention. It simply keeps working, patient and thorough, finding the places your layers fail to protect. The hollow behind your knees, the curve of your lower back, the narrow gap where a sleeve rides up when you move. And you notice it not as pain at first, but as a quiet dulling of sensation, a soft heaviness that settles into muscle and bone. You breathe slowly, aware now that each inhale carries air sharper than the last, and each exhale leaves warmth behind for only a moment before it is taken again. And you begin to understand something travelers learned early, that cold is not a single experience but a progression, a series of thresholds crossed so gradually they are easy to miss if you are not paying attention. Your fingers feel thick inside your sleeves, not numb exactly, but distant, as if the signals from your hands must travel farther to reach you, and you test them gently, curling and uncurling until they respond, slower than before but still willing, and you tuck them deeper against your chest where warmth lingers longest. Your toes follow the same pattern, a faint tingling when you move them, a reminder that they are still yours, and you do not panic, because panic wastes energy, and energy is something you are guarding carefully now, responding instead with small adjustments, careful movements that keep blood flowing without inviting sweat. There was an understanding among people who crossed winter ground like this, that sleep itself could be dangerous, not because rest was bad, but because deep sleep dulled awareness, and awareness was sometimes the only thing standing between endurance and collapse. And although they did not have modern words for hypothermia, they recognized its shape through experience. Some groups took turns nudging one another awake through the worst nights. Others relied on instinct, on the body's natural resistance to letting go when conditions were wrong. And lying here you feel that instinct working quietly, keeping you hovering just short of full surrender. An odd note from an old winter diary surfaces in your thoughts, describing someone rubbing frozen feet with snow before warming them, a practice that sounds alarming now but was believed to prevent worse injury. Whether it helped or harmed still debated, and you are grateful that tonight your task is simpler, not to experiment but to conserve. The cold presses inward steadily, testing your defenses, and you answer without words, slowing your breath, counting exhales not out of fear, but to anchor yourself. Inhale, pause, exhale, each cycle creating a small pocket of warmth inside your chest that you imagine shielding carefully. You pull fabric higher over your face, breathing through cloth again, warming the air before it reaches your lungs, moisture gathering quickly and stiffening the fabric, but you accept that trade, because warmth now matters more than dryness later, and you remind yourself that wool holds heat even when damp. Someone nearby shifts, and a brief ribbon of cold air slips across your ankles before the layers settle again. and you tense, then relax, learning again that shared space magnifies every change, that everyone here is balancing the same fragile equation. The floorboards beneath you feel harder as the night wears on, cold making everything more rigid, and your hip aches where it presses against the wood, so you slide a folded garment beneath it, moving slowly, carefully, until the pressure eases just enough to be tolerable, relief arriving in degrees, not absolutes. At some point, the cold becomes familiar, not comfortable but known, a weight you carry rather than an enemy charging toward you, and your body adapts, drawing boundaries around what it can spare, keeping your core warm while allowing extremities to complain, a quiet triage happening without your consent. You do not think about mourning yet, or what it might look like. You think only about the next breath, the next small adjustment, the next moment of stillness, and you let your eyes close again, not expecting sleep, but allowing your thoughts to soften. The cold remains patient and persistent, but you are still here, meeting it inch by inch, breath by breath, listening as the wagon holds, the storm presses on, and the long night continues to stretch forward, waiting. Your breathing becomes something you notice in detail now, not just as a rhythm, but as a physical act with consequences. Each inhale bringing air that feels thin and sharp, each exhale returning it warmer, heavier, carrying moisture with it into the confined space of the wagon, and although you cannot see it clearly in the dark, you sense it accumulating, proof that bodies are still working, still producing heat, still resisting the night. Slowly, the underside of the canvas grows damp, first in patches, then more evenly, and when the wind presses from outside, tiny droplets shake loose and fall, one landing cold against your cheek, another slipping through the fabric of your sleeve, and each time it happens you flinch, then still yourself again, because reacting costs more than enduring. People who travelled this way often wrote that wagons felt warmer than the open prairie, yet wetter at the same time, breath, sweat, and melting frost, having nowhere to go, and you are living inside that contradiction now, wrapped in damp warmth that never quite dries. The air smells different than it did earlier, heavier, less clean, carrying the faint sour edge of moisture mixed with wool and wood, and you notice how sound changes inside this thickened atmosphere, each breath echoing faintly, each small movement amplified, the wagon holding everything close. You adjust your breathing without meaning to. Slower inhales, longer exhales, warming the air before it reaches your lungs, and you shift the cloth over your mouth slightly, exposing one edge to drier air before covering again, a constant quiet negotiation between moisture and warmth. From somewhere near the center of the wagon comes the sound of a soft drip, condensation collecting enough to fall in heavier drops now. And although the noise is small, it feels loud in the stillness, marking time more clearly than any clock could. A lesser-known detail from winter travel accounts describes people cracking open a flap of canvas just enough to let damp air escape, even during storms, because too much moisture could make the cold feel sharper. But tonight, the wind outside feels too aggressive for such a risk, and no one suggests it. You accept the dampness as part of the night, pulling your hat lower as moisture settles along your hairline, the fabric stiffening slightly where breath freezes against it, and you press it down gently, careful not to crack it, shaping it to your face again. There is ongoing debate among historians about how much internal condensation contributed to illness on long journeys, damp clothing combined with cold creating ideal conditions for coughs and fevers, and lying here breathing air that feels increasingly heavy. You understand how easily a single night could plant the seeds of sickness. Still, there is nothing to be done now but endure, and endurance here is quiet, almost invisible, marked by small decisions not to move, not to shake, not to complain, and by the steady choice to keep breathing slowly. Someone nearby coughs again, deeper this time, then clears their throat, and the sound lingers longer than it should, making you tense briefly before settling again, hoping it is nothing more than irritation from cold air. Your own throat feels tight now, not painful, just dry and sensitive, and you swallow carefully, resisting the urge to reach for water, because movement would expose you, and spilled liquid would steal warmth you cannot spare. Instead, you let your breathing do the work, warming the air before it enters your chest, feeling the slow rise and fall beneath layers of cloth, and focusing on that motion until it becomes grounding. The storm outside has softened slightly, snow-absorbing sound, wrapping the wagon in a cocoon of muffled pressure, and this stillness is almost unsettling after hours of noise, silence feeling heavier than wind. You listen carefully for signs of strain, for the return of sharp flapping or cracking, but the wagon holds settled deeper into its temporary nest of snow, and you release another breath you did not realize you were holding. Moisture continues to gather, sleeves dampen, collars cling, and fabric grows heavier against your skin, but you press it closer anyway, because warmth, even imperfect warmth, is worth the discomfort. As your breathing slows further, your thoughts follow, drifting without effort, and although sleep still does not fully arrive, your body finds a quieter state, one that feels sustainable, one that can last. You close your eyes again, aware of the dampness, aware of the cold waiting patiently beyond the canvas, and you continue to breathe, trusting that this simple act, repeated carefully, is enough to carry you through another stretch of the night. As the wagon remains still, held in place by snow and darkness, waiting with you for whatever comes next. At some point in the night, breathing stops being something you do automatically and becomes something you actively participate in. Each inhale taken with awareness, each exhale released slowly, because the air inside the wagon no longer feels neutral. It feels earned, sharpened by cold on the way in, and thickened by warmth on the way out, changed every time it passes through you. The canvas above you grows clammy to the touch without ever being touched, moisture collecting unseen until gravity takes over and cold droplets fall at irregular intervals, landing on skin or cloth with just enough shock to pull you back into awareness. Reminders that this shelter is temporary, porous, alive in its own uneasy way. People who crossed winter plains often describe this strange imbalance, how a wagon could feel safer than the open land, and yet more uncomfortable at the same time, warmer but wetter, quieter but heavier, because breath and sweat had nowhere to escape, turning the interior into a shared atmosphere shaped by everybody inside it. You notice the smell shifting again. Wool no longer dry, wood no longer clean, everything carrying a faint dampness that clings to fabric and memory alike, and you realize how closely survival here is tied to tolerance, to accepting sensations that would feel unbearable anywhere else. Your mouth feels dry now, your throat tight from hours of breathing cold air through layers of cloth, and you swallow slowly, choosing stillness over relief, because reaching for water would mean movement, exposure, the risk of spilling cold liquid where warmth is most precious. Instead, you adjust your breathing again, letting it slow naturally, warming the air before it reaches your lungs, shaping each breath as carefully as you shape the layers around your body. And you become aware of how even this simple act creates a rhythm. The night cannot interrupt. Somewhere nearby, condensation finally gathers enough to fall in heavier drops, the sound sharp in the quiet, marking time more clearly than minutes ever could. And although you remember reading that some travelers cracked open a flap of canvas to release damp air, tonight, the wind outside feels far too aggressive for that gamble. So you accept the moisture as part of the cost, pulling your hat lower as the fabric stiffens with frost and breath, reshaping it gently against your face, careful not to disturb what little warmth has settled there. The cold outside has changed character again, its edge softened by snow piling high enough to muffle sound, wrapping the wagon in a stillness that feels almost unnatural after hours of wind. And this quiet makes you uneasy in a different way, because silence leaves room for imagination. You listen closely for signs of strain, a sudden flap, a sharp tear, anything that would signal failure, but nothing follows, and the wagon remains pressed into its snowy cradle, holding its shape, holding you. Your sleeves are damp now, collars cling faintly to skin, and fabric feels heavier with every hour that passes. Yet you draw it closer anyway, because warmth, even imperfect warmth, matters more than comfort. And you have learned by now to choose what lasts over what feels good. A cough breaks the stillness again, deeper this time, then fades, and although the sound tightens something in your chest, you let it go, understanding how easily cold irritates lungs and throats, how common this was on the trail, how often it passed without consequence. Your own breathing steadies again, slow and deliberate, and as your body settles into a state that feels sustainable rather than comfortable, your thoughts begin to drift without effort, loosening their grip on the present. You are no longer waiting for sleep, only allowing rest to arrive where it can, in shallow stretches, in moments of stillness between awareness and dreams, and you understand now why so many people wrote not about sleeping through storms, but about enduring nights like this one. The wagon does not grow warmer, the cold does not retreat, the moisture does not disappear, but something inside you adjusts, accepting the conditions as they are, shaping itself around them, and as you close your eyes again, breathing slowly through cloth and darkness, you allow the night to continue unfolding at its own pace, knowing there is still much more ahead, and that for now, staying is enough. As the hours deepen and the air inside thickens with shared breath, you begin to sense that warmth has become a collective act rather than an individual one. It drifts through the cramped space like a fragile currency, traded wordlessly between bodies, building and fading in waves that follow movement. A shoulder shifts, and a narrow strip of air changes temperature. Someone exhales near your back, and for a moment, the cold pulls away from your spine before quietly returning. Closeness, once awkward, has turned into a kind of survival agreement. There is no conversation about it, no apology when a knee brushes against another or an arm drifts too near. Space has lost meaning inside this wagon. The cold outside has erased personal boundaries, leaving only the simple mathematics of shared heat. You can tell without seeing who is most awake. The rhythm of breathing gives it away. The faint, uneven sigh of someone fighting sleep. The slower pulse of another who has drifted into shallow dreams. These sounds merge into the background hum of the wagon itself, wood and canvas, and breath forming a single, uneven heartbeat. Historians often wonder how strangers manage to endure such closeness on the trail, how people who began their journeys polite and separate could, by midwinter, sleep pressed so near that they breathed each other's warmth. But lying here, the answer feels self-evident. Distance is a luxury the weather does not allow. There are smells now that will never wash out completely. Damp wool, leather warmed and cooled, smoke that lingers in hair and fabric. Together, they make a scent you will always remember, though you will not describe it later. It is the smell of people staying alive. A small body stirs near the center, perhaps a child restless in its sleep. You hear the faint rustle of fabric, the quick, soft sound of a mother's hand finding a shoulder, pressing it gently still. The motion barely carries, but the warmth of it does. There is tenderness even here, wrapped in cold and dark. You remember reading once that travelers often place the youngest or frailest in the center of the wagon, surrounded by others on every side, not as an act of sentiment but of physics. Heat travels outward. Bodies become barriers. Survival, it turns out, is sometimes built in circles. Outside, the wind has changed tone again. It no longer howls, it hums. Snow has climbed high enough against the wagon walls that the blizzard now moves more slowly, its voice low and heavy, like something tired but not yet finished. The canvas flexes less often, and when it does, the sound is softer, cushioned by the drift that has formed around you. You are aware of it, pressing now, a constant weight but not one that frightens you. If anything, it feels protective, sealing out what remains of the open air. The wagon no longer shivers, it breathes. Your own breathing syncs with it, slow and steady. Inhale with the faint outward push of the canvas. Exhale as it relaxes inward again. It feels like a conversation, the storm speaking and the wagon answering. There are moments, brief and quiet, when you think you hear something else beneath the wind. The sound of hooves shifting in the snow, the soft creak of leather harness frozen stiff. The animals outside are still there, their presence more comforting than any prayer. As long as they move, you are not lost. You picture them standing close to one another, heads lowered, steam rising in clouds that vanish almost instantly into the dark. Their patience humbles you. They do not question the cold. They do not resist the night. They simply exist within it, waiting for morning to make itself known. That thought calms you more than warmth could. You draw the blanket tighter around your chest and let your mind loosen its grip on awareness. The cold remains, the damp remains, the faint ache in your hip remains, but they are no longer the story. The story now is the rhythm, breath, wood, snow, silence. And somewhere far beyond the canvas, dawn is being assembled, slow and pale, not ready to show itself yet, but close enough that you can almost feel it waiting. Time has thinned out by now, stretched so far that minutes and hours no longer feel distinct. What remains is rhythm, the soft creak of wood, the slow pulse of breathing, the faint shuffle of fabric as someone adjusts their position in half sleep. You are not sure how long it has been since you first lay down. The storm has not ended, but it has changed, trading violence for weight, sound for silence. Snow presses high along the sides of the wagon now, smoothing the world outside into a seamless white slope. Inside, the air is dense with breath and frost, thick enough that every inhale feels like it carries a trace of everyone else's warmth. When you exhale, the fog drifts upward and disappears against the dark canvas, joining the slow accumulation of ice that glitters faintly in the dim grey light filtering through. The cold no longer startles you. It has become something familiar, a companion that has learned your habits. It presses at the edges, waiting for weakness, but you know how to hold it off now, how to breathe small and steady, how to stay still enough that heat stays trapped. You have stopped thinking in terms of comfort. The body's goals have narrowed to endurance alone. Somewhere near your feet, someone murmurs, a half-formed dream spilling into the waking air. A quiet voice answers, gentle and unhurried. You cannot hear the words, but their tone carries something human and steady. The kind of sound that holds the dark at bay more effectively than any fire. You wonder what time it is, though the question feels meaningless here. Light and dark are no longer opposites. They are shades of the same endless cold. Still, a faint shift begins, almost invisible at first, the darkness losing its depth, the edges of shapes becoming easier to see. Morning is coming, though not quickly. There is movement outside, the muted sound of an animal shaking snow from its back, the jingle of frozen harness metal, knocking softly against wood. These noises ripple through the wagon, stirring everyone just enough that you can sense them waking without seeing it. A cough, the stretch of a cramped leg, a long exhale that sounds like relief disguised as exhaustion. For those who travelled west in wagons, morning was never graceful. It was not a sunrise of beauty but of obligation, the hour when people climbed out from under damp blankets and faced whatever the storm had left behind. Many diaries speak of that first breath of open air, sharp as glass, the way it burned the throat yet promised survival simply because it still existed to be breathed. You imagine that moment ahead of you now, the flap of canvas pulled back, the hiss of snow falling inward, the world outside pale and endless, everything still and unfamiliar. You do not think about the journey yet or the miles ahead. Right now it is enough to imagine light returning. Inside, people are beginning to move more deliberately. The quiet cooperation that kept you alive through the night continues wordlessly. The slow unwinding of shared warmth, the careful folding of blankets, the instinctive checking of fingers, faces and voices to make sure everyone still answers when called. The air is colder now that bodies have shifted, the equilibrium broken. But it feels cleaner too, touched by something new. Hope perhaps, though you would not name it that. It is simply the recognition that the world has survived the same night you did. The wagon creaks one last time under the weight of snow, and a few flakes drift loose through a tear in the canvas, falling softly onto fabric and skin. They melt immediately, proof that warmth, however small, still exists here. You draw a slow breath, feeling its roughness, feeling its life, and for the first time in hours you let your body imagine movement again. The storm has not gone. It has merely changed its voice, but morning has begun to speak beneath it, quiet and persistent, the way light always does when it refuses to give up. By the time you realize the storm is weakening, the change has already been happening for some time. The wind's voice is no longer endless. It breaks into pauses now, moments of uncertain stillness between gusts. The canvas stops its ceaseless breathing. It hangs heavy and quiet, crusted with frost. The wagon feels heavier too, buried deeper in the snow than when night began. A dull, blue-grey light seeps through the seams in the fabric, hesitant and uneven, as if the day itself is unsure it belongs here yet. The air inside has turned sharp again, stripped of the breath warmth that kept it bearable. People begin to stir, not with energy, but with necessity. Small movements first, shoulders rolling, fingers flexing, faces tightening against the cold that rushes in the moment a blanket shifts. No one speaks at first. Speech feels too fragile for this kind of morning. There are only small noises, wood groaning softly as weight shifts, the dry sound of fabric being unfolded, a single cough that cuts through the silence, reminding everyone that voices still exist. When the first hand reaches for the canvas flap, it hesitates. The leather tie is frozen stiff, and it takes effort to work it loose. The flap resists at first, the edges crusted shut by a night's worth of ice and breath, but finally it gives. Cold light floods in. Not warmth, not yet, but light. Pale, indifferent, and impossibly wide. The snow outside rises high along the wagon sides, curving upward into gentle drifts that nearly reach the bows. The horizon has vanished again, erased not by storm this time, but by stillness. The land is a single, seamless field of white that catches and reflects every shred of morning. You lift your head, squinting, eyes watering against brightness that feels almost cruel. The air outside bites instantly at the exposed skin on your face, but it carries something else too, a faint sweetness that only comes after storms, a scent of clean, frozen earth, the ghost of movement returned to the world. Someone mutters a short prayer, half gratitude, half disbelief. Another person climbs awkwardly from the wagon, boots sinking deep into snow that looks solid but hides pockets of air beneath its crust. The sound it makes is soft, hollow, almost musical. You follow, slow and careful, feeling your joints protest the sudden demand for balance. The cold catches at your breath, sharp enough to sting, but for the first time it feels alive, not oppressive. Around you, people stretch their arms, stamp their feet, rub numb hands together. Faces are pale and drawn, yet every one of them carries the same quiet astonishment, an awareness that the night is past, that something has been endured. The horses stand close to the wagons, coated in frost that sparkles faintly in the newborn light. Their flanks rise and fall with the heavy rhythm of survival. Steam curls from their nostrils like threads of smoke. They blink slowly, unbothered by the cold that still lingers in the air. No one rushes to speak. No one pretends it was easier than it was. Instead, there is a kind of reverent silence, an unspoken truce between the living and the night that almost claimed them. The world looks changed, not because it is, but because they are. You climb a little higher in the snow, turning toward the east where the light is beginning to gather. The sky there is not bright, not golden, it is colorless, thin, the kind of dawn that feels borrowed rather than given. But still, it is dawn. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the air move against your face, the cold brushing your skin like something testing for life, and you realize it finds what it's looking for. You are still here. The storm has left no evidence of its cruelty, only quiet, only snow, only the faint sound of hooves shifting and wood settling as the wagons prepare to move again. And as you stand there, surrounded by the white immensity of a land remade overnight, you understand the quiet truth the frontier taught over and over again, that survival is rarely loud, rarely proud. It is the soft persistence of breath, the will to wait, and the small, deliberate act of opening your eyes when the world finally decides to let you. The light grows clearer, but not warmer. It filters through the thin morning haze with that hollow brightness unique to snow after a storm, soft yet blinding, beautiful yet merciless. Every shape around the wagons is rounded, buried, gentled by white. The world has been simplified overnight, turned into distance and silence, a blank page that stretches without interruption. You watch as a man lifts his arm to shield his eyes. The sleeve crackles with frozen wool. His breath leaves him in clouds that vanish as soon as they form. He doesn't speak, doesn't need to. Everyone knows what he's thinking. How strange it is that the world can look so calm after a night that felt like an ending. The oxen shift slowly, legs sinking into drifts that hide uneven ground beneath. Frost clings to their eyelashes. A few flakes fall as they shake their heads, sending fine white dust into the air that catches the light for a moment before disappearing again. The sound they make, hooves pressing into wet snow, is steady, rhythmic, almost soothing. Someone kneels near the wagon, brushing snow from a wheel. The wood groans softly under the touch, cold but alive. Another person breaks a crust of ice from the canvas edge, and a curtain of powdered frost falls in one graceful motion, scattering like ash. Beneath it, the fabric gleams dull and grey, still damp from the breath of those who slept beneath it. The air smells different now, cleaner, but emptier. The scent of smoke has gone. The wind that once roared now drifts lazily across the plain, carrying nothing but the faint rattle of harness rings and the sound of distant movement. Children, quiet all night, begin to whisper. Their voices sound small in the open air, like something the storm forgot to erase. A woman tucks a blanket tighter around a boy's shoulders, rubbing his arms through the fabric until color returns. The motion is slow, practiced, unthinking, the way one tends to life that has already proven its fragility. No one speaks of breakfast yet. The thought of food feels too far away, too complicated for hands that still remember the ache of stillness. Instead, they stand close to one another, sharing the kind of silence that exists only after surviving something that didn't care if they did. A wagon farther down the line creaks as its driver climbs to check the snow load. His boots make hollow prints across the drifted top. He pauses, scanning the horizon, but there is nothing to see. No color, no movement, only that endless field of white stretching into an unseen border. And still, somewhere beyond that emptiness, the next mile of the trail waits. It always does. The light continues to strengthen, washing color into faces, finding edges where darkness had erased them. The air hums faintly with the brittle quiet of daybreak. Each person breathes in, out, slow and deliberate, as though still learning how to do it again. You lift your hand to catch a flake that hasn't melted yet, translucent and perfect, balanced for a second before dissolving against your glove. It's enough to remind you that the world is moving again, slowly, quietly, without sound or ceremony. The storm is over, but the cold remains, and in that strange balance between what ended and what continues, the morning begins to build itself piece by piece, without hurry, without promise, but with the simple honesty of light returning. The first fire takes longer to coax back than anyone expects. The wood that was kept dry overnight is stiff with cold, and every spark seems to die before it catches. A man crouches beside the small pit they dug the day before, his breath rising in pale clouds as he shields a trembling flame with both hands. The others watch without speaking, their faces lit for a moment by a light that feels more symbolic than real. When the kindling finally smoulders, the smell of smoke cuts through the cold like a familiar voice. It curls upward, thin and blue at first, then darker as heat begins to wake inside the wood. The sound is soft, a quiet crackle that feels impossibly gentle after so many hours of wind. People edge closer, cautious, their boots sinking in snow that still hides frozen ground beneath. Someone sets a blackened kettle on a metal grate, brushing snow from its rim with a wool glove. The movement is unhurried, reverent almost, as though the act itself carries meaning beyond warmth. Soon a faint hiss rises from within, water beginning to thaw, to breathe again. Steam drifts out, curling like ghosts in the pale air, and for a moment everyone leans closer without realizing they've done it. Drawn by instinct, by memory, the smell of coffee or perhaps weak tea follows, thin, bitter, honest. The sort of drink that tastes better simply because it exists. A woman passes a tin cup to a boy whose hands shake too much to hold it steady. She steadies it for him, her fingers wrapped around his. The warmth between them spreads faster than the heat from the fire. The light outside grows clearer still, stretching farther across the drifts. Snow glitters in dull shades of blue and silver. The oxen begin to move again, shifting their weight, low grunts steaming in the morning air. A rope creaks, a buckle snaps free, the sound of routine returning to a place where nothing felt routine for hours. Around the fire, people speak for the first time. Not much. Short phrases, simple acknowledgements, a laugh that sounds strange in the open cold. Voices crack, unused to being loud after a night spent whispering to the dark. But there's relief inside those sounds, quiet proof that they've crossed something invisible together. Someone spreads a blanket near the fire to dry it. Someone else checks the wheels for ice. The small tasks of the living resume, one after another, unremarkable and sacred at once. From where you stand, you can see the line of wagons stretching along the white plain, each half buried, each surrounded by footprints and faint columns of smoke rising straight into a windless sky. The horizon is still grey, but not empty anymore. The world is returning its texture, inch by inch. You lift the cup to your lips, the metal cold against your skin, and the taste of warmth fills your mouth. Bitter, smoky, human. In that small moment, the storm feels like a story told long ago, and the silence around you is no longer fear, but space. The morning expands slowly. The sky brightens, the animals stir, and somewhere beyond the whiteness, the trail waits again. No one rushes toward it yet. For now they simply stand close to the fire, eyes half closed against the light, hands open to the smoke and heat, breathing in the day as if learning how to begin once more. The fire grows stronger now, its glow reflecting in the dull sheen of the metal pots. Someone adds a handful of dried twigs, another breaks a piece of frozen bread against a rock, the crust shattering with a brittle crack. The sound echoes faintly in the still air, a reminder that the world has found its voice again, cautious and subdued. A woman unwraps a parcel of bacon from cloth stiffened by frost. The fat glints pale against the morning light, and when it meets the pan, the sizzle cuts through the silence like a whisper of civilization. The smell follows almost instantly, rich, smoky, ancient, a smell that transforms the cold into something bearable. Heads lift, eyes soften. It is not hunger alone that draws them closer, but the sudden realization that comfort still exists, that the human world is beginning to rebuild itself, one sound, one scent, one shared breath at a time. Steam rises from the kettle in thicker curls now. The air above the fire wavers, and the first hints of color, orange, brown, silver-gray, creep back into the landscape. The snow glows faintly gold where the flames flicker against it. It is a fragile, shifting light, but it feels like a promise. Children huddle closer, hands outstretched to catch warmth that slips through their fingers as fast as it forms. A boy laughs, quiet, surprised at his own voice. It startles everyone for a moment. Then soft smiles appear in the pale faces around him. No one says anything, but the sound lingers, brightening the air. Someone tears a piece of bread and hands it down the line. Fingers brush briefly, gloved and stiff. Gratitude doesn't need words here. It is spoken in the simple act of sharing something that once seemed impossible to have again. The animals begin to move, stamping snow aside, snorting steam into the light. A man runs a gloved hand down the neck of a horse, muttering something low and kind. Frost cracks and falls from its mane like powdered glass. The sound of leather tightening, of harnesses pulled and checked, fills the morning with rhythm again. Farther off, another wagon stirs. A curtain of snow slides from its roof in a slow, graceful arc. Someone laughs softly at the sight, half exhaustion, half relief. The sound blends with the fire's steady crackle, the hiss of boiling water, the dull thud of boots against packed snow. The smell of food thickens, hanging in the cold air. For a moment, the storm feels like something that happened to someone else, long ago. The land, blank and blinding, feels almost gentle now, still dangerous, but quiet in its danger, like a great sleeping animal they have learned not to disturb. Someone pours coffee, or what passes for it, into tin cups. It is bitter and metallic, but it tastes like morning. A hand passes you one. You wrap both palms around it, feeling the heat seep through your gloves, through the ache in your fingers, through the thin crust of fatigue that still clings to your bones. When you drink, the warmth moves slowly through you, as though your body has forgotten how to receive it. The taste isn't pleasant, but it's alive, and that is enough. Around you, breath rises in small clouds. The sound of chewing, of quiet, murmured talk, fills the space that the wind left behind. The world is beginning again in ordinary ways, through the smell of smoke, through the clink of metal, through the quiet hum of people finding purpose after stillness. No one mentions the night. It doesn't need to be spoken of. It is understood, written into their movements, into the way they glance toward the sky, uncertain whether to trust its calm. A man looks east, shading his eyes. The sun is climbing higher now, pale gold against a field of white. It gleams on the edges of the wagons, the canvas, the animal coats, and finally on faces that still look tired but no longer afraid. The fire pops once, sending a single spark into the brightening air. Someone stirs the ashes. Someone tightens a strap. Someone laughs again. And slowly, without ceremony, the day begins. When they finally begin to move, it happens without decision, like breath resuming after being held too long. A single wagon creaks forward first, its wheels protesting against the crusted snow, and the sound pulls the others into motion one by one, until the long, uneven line begins to stretch once more across the white plain. The oxen lean into their collars, muscles quivering under hides dusted with frost. The horses snort clouds into the air, each exhale hanging for a heartbeat before vanishing. The rhythm of travel returns reluctantly, as though the world itself must remember how to turn again. Every movement feels fragile, hesitant, yet full of quiet intent. The wagon ruts that were carved yesterday have been erased overnight. The land is new again, smooth and trackless, and for a moment the travelers look out across it as if they have arrived on another planet, one built from silence, wind, and the memory of what almost broke them. Each step forward is an act of faith. The wheels sink deep, then rise again, snow folding beneath and closing behind them without a trace. The sound is steady but muted. The crunch of frozen crust, the soft groan of timber, the creak of leather stretched in cold. No voices call out yet. Words belong to warmer hours. A child peeks out from under the canvas, cheeks flushed pink against the pale morning. His eyes widen at the glittering emptiness. There is no fear in them, only awe, the kind that belongs to those too young to understand how close the world came to stopping. The wind returns, lighter now, brushing through the camp smoke and lifting small flurries of snow into the air. It carries the faint scent of ashes, of bacon gone cold, of the last traces of morning comfort. Behind them, the fire they built shrinks to a dark dot in the white expanse, then disappears entirely, swallowed by distance. The horizon remains hidden. The sky and the land are the same color, a seamless grey-white that makes it impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. Yet the people keep moving toward it, as though direction were something they could feel in their bones. You walk beside the wagon, boots crunching softly, watching the tracks fill almost instantly behind you. There's a strange comfort in it, the way the past disappears so quickly, as though the storm itself is helping you forget. The air is colder out here than inside, but it feels cleaner, more honest. Each breath hurts a little less. Your hands have thawed enough to flex freely again, and your face, though raw, feels alive. Survival has a texture now, a raw, sharp awareness of skin, wind, and movement. Far ahead, a dark shape marks the next wagon in line. Beyond that, only the shimmering emptiness of the plains. Somewhere under all that snow lie grass, dirt, and the buried outlines of old wagon ruts from travelers who passed before you. For a brief moment, you imagine their nights too, the same frost, the same silence, the same slow morning after. Snow crunches again underfoot. Leather groans, a driver clicks his tongue softly, urging the team onward. The wagons follow like ships breaking through a frozen sea. The wind hums a single low note across the canvas tops, turning the procession into a kind of moving hymn, solemn, unhurried, full of endurance. And as you walk, the cold feels less like something that hunts you and more like something that walks beside you. Still vast, still powerful, but no longer an enemy. Just another traveler, headed west. The hours unfold quietly, one after another, without measure. The line of wagons moves slowly across the blank horizon, dark shapes against the white, barely shifting, except for the faint shimmer of light that follows them. The world has no edges now, only distance and repetition. Each mile looks like the one before it, each breath like the last. The sky remains pale, almost colorless, and yet the light begins to soften. The sun does not shine so much as reveal itself faintly through the haze, a blurred circle that barely touches the frozen air. Its presence feels fragile, temporary, like a lantern seen through glass. Still, it is enough to remind everyone that the day is moving forward. The cold has returned, not sharp as it was before, but steady, insistent. It travels through the air like memory, less painful now, but impossible to forget. Every so often, someone pulls their collar higher or adjusts the cloth around their hands. The sound of fabric against fabric replaces speech. Children fall quiet again, lulled by the rhythm of the wagon wheels. The older ones stare out through the canvas openings, their faces expressionless, the way travelers look when there's nothing left to do but move. The snow reflects light upward, painting their cheeks with pale color, their eyes half closed against the glare. Somewhere ahead, a man hums under his breath, a thin, tuneless sound that wavers with the motion of the wagon. It is not a song exactly, more a rhythm for his thoughts to follow. The sound carries softly through the air and fades into the space between the wagons, where wind and memory share the same voice. The animals breathe hard now. Their nostrils flare, their bodies steaming faintly in the faint light. Frost gathers along the reins and ropes, glittering like silver threads. Each step they take is a small act of endurance. You can see the effort in their shoulders, in the dark lines of sweat freezing into their coats. Yet they move on. There's a moment when the wind changes again, brushing sideways across the line of travelers. The air shifts, and with it comes a faint new scent, wood smoke, far off. It's too light to be from their own camp, too distant to be familiar. The sound of the man's humming stops. Heads lift, eyes narrow against the brightness. Maybe it's another group. Maybe a settlement. Maybe nothing at all. Just the memory of fire carried through frozen air. No one says it aloud, but the thought stirs something inside each of them. Something small and warm and human that had almost fallen asleep. The day continues. The shadows lengthen. The sky darkens not with clouds, but with the soft, gradual fading of light that comes when the sun has done all it can. The horizon turns silver, then blue, then the faintest shade of violet. The plain changes color with it, a slow transformation that makes everything shimmer for a moment before returning to gray. The cold deepens again. The wind begins to lift the top layer of snow into small spirals that dance briefly and disappear. Someone speaks at last. A quiet voice carried backward through the air. We shall stop soon. The words seem unnecessary. Everyone already knows. The rhythm of travel has slowed. The animals lower their heads. The wagons creak in protest as they pull into a loose circle, each one facing inward, their shadows stretching long and thin across the snow. No one rushes. No one complains. The silence that fills the space between them feels almost kind now. They move with the patience of people who have already seen the worst the night can offer. The sun slips lower until only its reflection remains, scattered across the snow like fragments of glass. The light fades slowly, lingering just long enough to remind them that it will come again. And as the cold begins to settle for the second time that day, you find yourself listening to the same sounds that began it all: the creak of wood, the soft hiss of snow, the long, steady breathing of travelers, learning once more how to outlast the night. Evening does not arrive as an event, but as a slow dimming, a gradual softening of everything sharp. The air loses its shimmer. The snow turns from silver to grey, and then to a blue so deep it feels almost liquid. The travelers stop as one might stop breathing for a moment, to listen, to make sure the world is still there. The wagons settle into a half circle, their shadows folding inward like closing hands. Snow is cleared methodically with shovels, boots, and bare branches. Each motion is deliberate, economical, done without hurry or complaint. The memory of the blizzard still lives in their bodies. It has taught them that time is not something to fight. Someone begins to build another fire. The sparks dull against the growing night. The wood is cold, reluctant to catch. When it does, the light it gives off is thin, no larger than a candle's heart at first. It grows, but never quite enough to push the darkness away. It only shapes it, carves it into gentler forms. The people gather again, closer this time, more comfortable in their closeness. They speak quietly now, their voices wrapped in the same hush that covers the land. The conversation is not about distance or plans. It is about small things: how the wind changed, how the snow will crust over by morning, how someone's horse still refuses to eat. The children fall asleep quickly, their heads resting on folded arms, the rhythm of the journey still echoing in their breathing. A mother pulls a blanket higher over her daughter's face, and the little girl sighs without waking. The sound is so soft it feels like part of the snow itself. The smell of smoke and meat mixes with the frost again, rising and curling into the open air. It moves upward until it dissolves into the sky, invisible, leaving behind the simple certainty that life still burns somewhere within the white silence. Far beyond the circle of firelight, the land lies untouched, vast and unknowable. The last glow of sunset clings to the horizon in a thin, trembling line, and the first stars appear above it. Sharp, cold, perfect. Someone hums low beside the fire, not a song but something close, a sound made for company rather than melody. The flames answer with a soft crackle. Sparks drift upward, vanishing into the dark like tiny prayers that never ask to be answered. The cold returns gradually. It does not strike now, it seeps, threading through the layers of wool and leather, reminding each person that warmth is a privilege, not a state. But there's no fear in it anymore. They have learned its rhythm, its patience. The cold has become part of the conversation. A man pours a little melted snow into a tin cup, the metal gleaming faintly in the firelight. He drinks, then passes it along. The cup goes from hand to hand, everyone taking only enough to wet their lips. No one speaks gratitude aloud, but the act itself is full of it. The animals stand near the wagons again, their shapes blending with the dark. Occasionally a hoof shifts, a chain rattles, a slow breath steams into the air. The sound settles into the night, like punctuation between silences. You look upward. The sky is impossibly wide. Stars multiply by the minute, countless and clear, as though the storm had scoured the heavens clean. The moon rises pale, diffused by thin clouds. Its light touches the snow, turning it into a faintly glowing sea. And there, between the dull gold of the fire and the silver of the moon, the travellers drift into another night. quieter than the last, less afraid, their bodies heavy with exhaustion, and their hearts emptied of everything but endurance. The snow whispers against the wagons again. The canvas breathes. The world exhales. You lie back, eyes half open, and listen as the sound of life folds softly into the cold. The fire has burned low again. Its light no longer reaches far, and the faces gathered around it fade into silhouettes, soft outlines that move when the flames breathe. Beyond that circle, the world is all silver and blue, snow glowing faintly under the moon, sky black and deep enough to fall into. The sound of the storm has long gone. What remains is smaller, the shifting of animals, the whisper of cooling ash, the quiet stretch of canvas adjusting to the night air. Every sound feels measured, as though the land itself has learned to whisper. You lie half awake inside the wagon, body folded into the same shape it learned during the blizzard. The boards beneath you are cold but familiar now, almost reassuring in their roughness. The air is clear, clean, and impossibly still. When you breathe, the sound feels too loud, so you let it slow until it matches the rhythm of everything else, steady, patient, unhurried. Somewhere outside, a horse stamps softly, and the faint jingle of its harness carries through the night. It sounds like something distant but kind, a reminder that the world continues just beyond reach. A few flakes of snow drift down from the roof and land near your hand, melting slowly into the fabric. You watch the dark spots spread, then disappear. Sleep comes differently now. It doesn't pull you under. It circles you, slow and weightless, blurring the edges of thought. The mind begins to loosen its grip. You think of the day's light still lying somewhere in the west, buried beneath the horizon. You think of the endless white, now transformed by moonlight into something softer, almost merciful. There's a dreamlike quiet that settles over the camp, so deep that you begin to imagine you can hear the stars themselves, their faint hum woven into the frozen air. The cold presses close, but not as an enemy anymore. It feels like presence, like a vast listening. Inside, people shift in their sleep. You hear the slow rustle of fabric, a sigh, the small click of someone's teeth as they dream. These sounds are as gentle as the snow outside, blending into a rhythm that is neither waking nor rest. It is survival in its most delicate form, life continuing quietly. The fire outside gives one last crack, a single coal bursting with a faint red glow before it fades into ash. A wisp of smoke curls through the air, then vanishes. In its place, moonlight fills the camp, pale and patient. You close your eyes again, and for a moment the wagon seems to move, not in space, but in memory, as if it's drifting over the plains, carried by wind and silence, sailing through a sea of light. You cannot tell if you are dreaming or remembering, and it doesn't matter. The night feels endless, and kind, and old, and somewhere in that distance between waking and sleep, the prairie breathes slow and heavy, folding its cold arms around everything that dares to rest within it. When morning returns, it arrives as light before warmth. A pale shimmer brushes across the snow, so faint at first that it could be mistaken for the echo of a dream. The stars dissolve one by one, and the sky brightens, not blue yet, not gold, just the delicate colour of frost seen through breath. The wagon stirs, a body shifts, a hand moves beneath the blanket. Someone exhales sharply, breaking the fragile stillness that has held all night. The sound is followed by another, and then another, the small orchestra of people remembering how to live again. The air is bitter, but it is different now. The kind of cold that belongs to morning, not to fear. It smells faintly of ash, leather, and something new, like thawing wood, like the edge of spring, still hiding somewhere below the snow. When you push the flap aside, the world outside glows softly. The drifts are smoother now, sculpted by wind and moonlight into quiet curves. The plains stretch outward, unbroken, shimmering beneath the first rays of sun that creep slowly above the horizon. It is not bright yet. The light feels hesitant, cautious, as though unsure it should return at all. You step down into the snow, boots sinking deep. The crust gives way with a muted sigh. The cold bites, but gently, the kind of cold that reminds you you're still here. One by one, others emerge from the wagons, their breath trailing behind them like ghosts unwilling to leave. They move slowly, stiffly, eyes narrowed against the glare, faces pale, lips cracked, clothes stiff with frost, and yet in the quiet they look peaceful. There's something almost sacred about this kind of exhaustion. A horse shakes its mane, sending small crystals of ice scattering into the air like shards of glass. The animals stand close to one another, sides steaming faintly. A man walks between them, patting their flanks with gloved hands, murmuring in a low, steady voice. The sound is soft, reverent, almost a prayer. Someone crouches near the ashes of last night's fire. The snow around it has melted and frozen again, forming a ring of dull glass. Beneath it, embers still pulse faintly. With a breath and a handful of dry twigs, the man coaxes them back to life. Smoke curls upward once more, thin and blue, weaving through the air like a signal to the waking world. The first smell of wood smoke carries far. It mingles with the scent of snow and sun and distance, and for the first time in many days, the wind feels warm against the side of your face. Not truly warm, but full of the memory of it, like a whisper from another season. The light climbs higher. The snow turns gold at the edges. Shadows shorten, softening into shapes that feel familiar again. Wagons, horses, people, all defined once more by sunlight. Someone laughs quietly. Another answers. It's not loud, not forced. Just two human voices echoing across the white. It feels strange and beautiful at the same time. The sound of ordinary life reclaiming the silence. A kettle is placed on the rekindled fire. The metal groans as it heats, and soon a thin column of steam rises, coiling upward into the cold. Someone adds a handful of coffee grounds, the smell drifting across the camp. There's no hurry now. The day will come when it's ready. The travelers stand close, shoulders brushing, eyes fixed on the horizon where the light grows stronger by the minute. The snow glows brighter, the air clearer. For a fleeting moment, the land seems endless again, and the world feels merciful. You lift your hand, watching sunlight scatter across the frost. The warmth on your glove is almost imperceptible, but it's there, proof that even the hardest cold must move aside when morning decides to stay. By mid-morning, something in the light changes. It is small at first, a flicker across the edge of a drift, the faintest suggestion of color where the snow dips into shadow, but it grows quietly until the whole plain seems to glow from beneath. The white no longer blinds, it softens, reflecting warmth instead of deflecting it. The air carries a new scent now, not clean like snow, not sharp like smoke. Something older, heavier, alive. The smell of wet earth beginning to wake beneath the frost. It rises faintly, a whisper from below, reminding everyone that this season too must end. A man kneels near the fire, stirring the last of the coals into a steady flame. The smoke climbs straight up. No wind now, just stillness. Around him, the snow nearest the fire begins to collapse in on itself, revealing streaks of dark mud and grass, pressed flat from the weight of winter. Steam rises from the ground like breath. Someone crouches to touch it. Their fingers come away black, slick, and strangely warm. They smile just slightly, as if the touch of dirt feels like a luxury. For months, everything has been clean in a way that hurts, the cold kind of purity that kills softness. But now the smell of thawed mud carries something almost holy. Farther out, drops of meltwater trace tiny paths down the sides of the wagons. They freeze again near the bottom, turning into half-formed icicles, fragile bridges between cold and warmth. The sound of dripping is everywhere, irregular, musical, a new rhythm beginning. The animals seem to sense it first. The oxen lower their heads and nudge the ground where the snow thins. The horses paw at the surface, revealing thin blades of crushed yellow grass. They chew it greedily, snorting as if laughing at the taste. The sound draws quiet smiles from those nearby. The travellers move slowly, but differently now. There is no rush, yet their gestures carry purpose. The small, unspoken urgency of people who understand that the world is shifting. Blankets are hung to dry, boots are scraped clean. Someone patches a sleeve with calm, careful stitches. Someone else hums, the tune unfamiliar but warm. Children chase the drops of melting snow that fall from the wagon roofs, their laughter echoing faintly across the white. The sound does not startle anyone this time. It fits. The sun rises higher. Its light feels solid again, with weight and color. Patches of earth appear like islands in the sea of snow, each one dark, wet, promising. A woman tilts her face upward, eyes closed, lips parted slightly. Her skin is raw from wind, but the sunlight touches it gently. The shadow of her bonnet falls across her cheeks like lace. When she opens her eyes again, they are wet, though not from tears, just the shock of seeing color return to the world. The wagon canvas glows warm at the edges, the frozen fabric softening as the frost melts into threads of silver. Steam curls from the oxen's backs, drifting upward until it merges with the bright air. The land smells of ash, thaw, and life beginning again. Someone says quietly, almost to themselves, "We made it." No one answers because they don't need to. You look out across the plains and see the trail ahead, shining faintly under the new light. It is not dry yet, not easy, but it exists again, visible and real. The storm is a memory now, stored in the bones, in the smell of wet canvas, in the weight of the blankets drying by the fire. The cold has not gone. It lingers in the wind's edge, in the shadows, but it no longer rules. Spring, cautious and half awake, has begun to speak. The first bird call breaks the silence. It is so thin, so distant, that at first you think you imagined it. But then it comes again, clear and small against the melting sky. Heads lift, hands pause mid-motion. The sound carries over the wagons, over the animals, over the soft hiss of dripping snow. No one says a word. They simply listen. Because after a season of storms and silence, the smallest sound of life feels like a miracle. By the end of the week, the snow no longer rules the land. It hides only in the deepest shadows, in narrow gullies and beneath the wagons where sunlight has not yet reached. Everywhere else, the white has broken open to reveal a world remade. The plains no longer gleam. They glisten. The earth itself seems to breathe, steaming gently under the warmth of returning light. Mud replaces silence. It squelches under boots and hooves alike, clinging stubbornly to every surface. But even that heaviness feels like progress. After months of brittle, airless cold, the softness beneath their feet feels like grace. Water runs in shallow streams between the wagons, carrying fragments of straw and ash. The sound is quiet, constant, a soft trickle that feels impossibly alive. When you kneel to touch it, it's colder than it looks, but it slides over your skin like something ancient, cleansing. It smells faintly of iron, earth, and distance. Children crouch nearby, tracing the flow with sticks, their laughter bright against the grey sky. One of them splashes too hard and loses a boot to the mud. A ripple of laughter spreads through the camp, not mockery but relief, the sound of people remembering how to find humor in living things. The air is full of scent now, wet grass, thawed wood, smoke that no longer bites but curls lazily upward. 1,000 small smells that have been missing return all at once, filling the lungs with the memory of seasons. The animals move freely again. The horses' coats shine with a reddish gloss under the weak sun, and the oxen flick their tails lazily, the steam from their breath gone thin and soft. A few steps away, a dog appears, thin, mud-splashed, wagging its tail as if it had been waiting underground all winter just to be seen. Someone hums while mending a harness, and someone else begins to wash clothes in melted snow water, wringing each piece until the color of earth seeps out. Lines are strung between the wagons and fabric sways gently in the breeze, muted colors of life against the pale sky. The The trail ahead, once buried, has reappeared, a winding line of half-frozen puddles and shining ruts. Beyond it, the grass shows hints of green. The horizon no longer looks like a wall, it looks like a promise. Around noon, sunlight warms the canvas tops enough that droplets begin to fall in a steady rhythm. The sound is almost musical, tiny percussions against wood and earth. A few people pause to listen, smiling faintly at the rhythm of renewal. You sit on a log near the fire that smokes but refuses to burn clean, its scent sweet with damp wood. Around you, voices rise, soft, unguarded, full of small stories, a broken strap, a remembered spring, the way the snow melted differently in Kansas than it does here. No one speaks of the blizzard anymore. It exists only in the pauses, in the way hands linger near warmth, in the instinct to pull blankets close even under sunlight. But the fear has lost its edge. It has turned into respect, an understanding carved into bone and breath. In the distance, the land changes color by the hour. Brown fades to ochre, ochre to green. Thin blades of grass rise like threads through the thawing soil. Birds, a few at first, then many, cross the sky in uneven flocks, their cries sharp and joyful. The sound fills the empty spaces the wind once owned. You tilt your head back and watch them pass until they vanish into light. The air feels warmer on your skin now, still cool but alive. It carries the faint buzz of insects just waking under the soil. And as you sit there, between the wagons, between what was and what is coming, you realize that survival was never the end of the story. The land itself is beginning again, and you with it. The earth exhales, the mud steams, and the wind, no longer cruel, brushes gently against your face as though to say, "It's over now." By the time the wagons move again, the world feels new beneath them. The ruts are soft, filled with water that gleams like glass under the afternoon sun. Each wheel sinks deep, then rises, leaving behind perfect circles that fill instantly with mud and light. The sound is wet, rhythmic, alive, a far cry from the frozen silence of weeks before. The air hums faintly with insects now, and somewhere close, a small stream has found its voice again. It runs quick and silver between tufts of grass just beginning to green, catching the sunlight like a blade. When you listen closely, you can hear the difference in the wind. It no longer howls. It sighs. The caravan stretches out once more, oxen, horses, dogs, and the slow creaking line of wagons inching forward into the thaw. Every canvas top is still stained with the memory of ice. Every plank still dark with water, but they gleam now in a softer light. Steam rises from them as the sun warms the damp wood, curling upward like a quiet blessing. A child leans out from under one of the wagon covers, holding a stick carved smooth from the firewood of the last camp. He drags it lazily along the rim of the wheel, tracing grooves into the mud as they move. His laughter joins the sound of water and wood and wind, an unplanned music that belongs entirely to the living. Someone hums again, a tune that carries farther this time, no longer hesitant. Others join without thinking. Low voices, wordless and warm. The song wavers across the open plain, unafraid of echo. Even the animals seem to move in time with it, hooves rising and falling to its quiet rhythm. The horizon shines wide and empty ahead. It is not kind, not cruel. It simply waits. The sky is pale gold now, clouds drifting like smoke across it, and the light spills low over the land, turning every puddle into a mirror. You glance back once. The place where the storm buried you is gone, erased by melt and distance. Only the faint line of the trail remains, and even that is fading. You realize that this is how the prairie forgets. Gently, completely. There will be more nights, more storms, more cold, but none will be exactly this one. Each mile will bring a new test, a new horizon, a new morning to wake into. The land is still vast, still wild, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like something that can be crossed. The wheels turn, the mud splashes, the sunlight follows, And as the last wagon disappears into the glare of the open west, the sound of movement blends with the steady breathing of the earth, a rhythm older than hardship, older than fear, the rhythm of life continuing. The plains close behind you, smooth and shining, and the wind carries only the faint echo of your passing, the whisper of canvas, the creak of wood, and the soft, unbroken promise of spring.